All right. Hello, everyone. We're just going to go ahead and wait to get started here for another minute as other folks join. Thank you for being at this Cognitos webinar. We're very happy to have you. We'll go ahead and let folks start to come through and get started again here just in 1 minute. All right, seeing more people join. Thank you for being here. Again, just going to get started maybe in another 45 seconds or so, and then I'll mention it as well, but we are recording this session, so it'll make sure to be available to anybody who misses any part of it or you want to share it with someone else. Okay, let's go ahead and kick it off. I'm Joe O'Neill, and welcome everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are. We're very excited about this use case-oriented webinar today. I know this is something that comes up all the time. I'm imagining a lot of you folks on the call today are SAP organizations using SAP a lot, and the four-way match is one of those elusive automation use cases that may have been attempted a lot of times, but not necessarily done well a lot of those times. So we're excited to talk about it today and some of the success we approached that through Kognitos. I have some really awesome team members that'll be with us today. Real quick, I'm just going to set some ground rules for the event just to make sure we can make it this as valuable as possible for everyone. We can go ahead and take a look at the next slide. First, today we're going to be talking about the setup for this use case, and that's talking about the unrealized potential of automation, as I alluded. Then we're going to be talking about specifically how this relates to how AI has opened up opportunities for us here, but what happens when it doesn't exactly go as planned. Then we'll talking about how uh, Kognitos and how tools like us go about making AI safe for enterprise and reliable for this particular use case, which is a very critical one for a lot of organizations. And then we'll go into the demo. The Q&A is we'll have a dedicated session for that at the end of today's webinar. But likewise, use that Q&A function there at the bottom of your screen to submit questions along the way. As relevant, we'll pull them in. We'll talk about those and be able to address it on the spot. We welcome any questions that you have. And if we don't get a chance to get to them, of course, we're happy to kind of follow up with everyone individually and address that firsthand. Um, like as I mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded. We usually distribute this within 24 hours to any registrants on the webinar, and we'll also host it on cognitos.com, where you can review this as well as other webinars we've hosted. And please be on the lookout. We actually have another webinar next week with our partners at Cubotica. I would encourage you to sign up for that and be a frequent visitor to Cognitos webinars. Without
Sorry, Joe, I'm exceptionally excited about that webinar as well. I will be joining you with the Cubotica team. That's going to be a good one.
Sounds good, George. We look forward to having you. And yeah, he revealed himself there, so I'm happy to have George Williams, who will be our technical expert on today's, and we'll be driving the demo. And alongside with him, we have another one of our automation experts here is Andrew Novich. Andrew, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, and you can take us from here.
All right. Hey guys, Indranovich here. I'm one of the automation experts here at Kognitos. Really excited to be here and chat with you guys today about not just SAP, but automation in general, right? So George and I just recently joined Kognitos, coming from a long background in cybersecurity. And the reason why we're so excited to be here with you today is this slide right here, right? People in the enterprise have been trying to automate for, not just the last couple of years with the advent of, generative AI, but we've been trying to do this for 20 plus years. And the reason why we, have struggled so much is because, traditional RPA, traditional, automation techniques have always kind of left the enterprise kind of wanting more, right? They're very fragile. They break a lot. You need a lot of maintenance to keep these things up and running. you have teams of developers that are going out and trying to get this set up so that way you can have an end-to-end process. But ultimately, what you're kind of left with is this you know extra cost with not a whole lot to show for it, right? So with Kognitos, we're kind of doing something a little bit different, right? We've brought generative AI to enterprise automation. So I think you'll kind of see exactly what kind of innovations we're bringing to the table with specifically with SAP today, but you can kind of extrapolate that to broader context. But I would say one of the big things that happens when you leverage AI in the enterprise is you have this really powerful new technology, but it doesn't always go as planned when you go and roll out AI. George, if you hit next, you know we've all seen headlines like this. These are all kind of in the last like week or so, right? Where AI can go off the rails and cause a lot of damage, right? Everything from, deleting production databases to, then going and lying about it, right? It's not an awesome setup. So, given the two choices between, hey, I'm not getting anywhere with my automation, in the traditional sense where I have to hard code everything and letting AI go run amok where all sorts of bad things happen and data gets deleted and everything gets messed up. We're kind of left in this like scenario where, okay, I've gone ahead and deployed AI. I've had something go wrong. AI has gone and deleted my homework. Now what do I do? George, if you want to hit the next slide. So, we shouldn't really be we shouldn't really be concerned by this because AI is designed to go out and creatively go solve problems and be very goal orientated, right? If you asked AI to go and get you a cup of coffee, it would just literally look to the nearest person with a cup of coffee and just go hand it to you, right? So we have to find a way to put guardrails around this and governance and really allow AI to be leveraged safely in the enterprise. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. So if you advance the next slide, some of the key differentiators of our platform are exactly what makes us safe for the enterprise and allow you to do very complicated workflows like an SAP four-way match without having any sort of issues around the repeatability or the transparency of what that AI model is doing. Right. So the first one here is we have agents that follow process, right? So we're using an LLM for, exactly what it's designed for, the creativity part, right? So when you put in that prompt of, hey, I want to do an SAP four-way match, right? We're using an LLM to understand the intent, but then to codify exactly what that looks like. And we're going to use natural English language to do that. So that way, folks on your accounting team, folks in your AR, your AP team can understand exactly what's happening and what steps it's taking. And then from there, right, we have, a full audit trail of every transaction that is happening there. So that way you understand exactly each run of the process, how you got from A to B. And then lastly, the way that we handle those exceptions, right? Traditional automation, traditional RPA, you end up running into these scenarios, these corner cases where the process doesn't know what to do, and then it'll just crash and burn and hold up all the other jobs that are running in that queue. With Kognitos, we do something a little bit different. The AI agent will actually reach back out to the human who owns that process, pull them back into the loop, and look for their input and their feedback to keep the jobs running, right? And while that's happening, all the other jobs that are not that corner case keep on flowing through the process there. So looking at the architecture, right, there's a couple of key things for to make a Kognitos process work. George, if you can advance one more. Perfect. So there's three different ways to trigger this, right? You can schedule a trigger. So think like your daily, weekly, monthly job, maybe a nightly one to go after hours. You can make an API call. So whether that's a push from Salesforce or some sort of file gets uploaded into SAP, or you can do something as simple as an email or a Slack or a Teams message, right? That kicks off the process. From there, these agents we'll go ahead and leverage their processing to understand exactly what that request is, what that trigger is going after, modify whatever data you're asking it to do, and then go ahead and write that back to that third-party system. So whether that's SAP, whether that's any of the integrations we have here, you can effectively have Kognitos talk to anything, right? And then to our point about separating production from test or development, right? We have a playground where you can essentially test these things out before you go ahead and launch them into production. So that way you have an air gap away from any of these AI snafus that we talked about in a couple slides ago. So that's the architecture at a high level. If we look a little bit deeper under the hood, right, we'll talk a little bit about where we use an LLM, right? So in the interface, you interact with Kognitos using natural language, like we talked about earlier, and like you'll see in a minute here. We'll use the LLM to understand the business request that's happening. So whether it's an SAP four-way match, whether it's interpreting a document and doing calculations, we're using that LLM to understand that and then go ahead and deliver it into English as code. English as code for us is essentially a set of written instructions that the AI agent is going to take and then go ahead and put it through our deterministic interpreter to essentially ensure that you have the same output for a given input every single time, right? So there's no AI hallucinations. We've all used like a chat GPT or something, asked it, the same question 10 times and we're getting 8 different answers, right? That's essentially what we're trying to eliminate here with our deterministic interpreter. From there, once we have our English as code set, we have an execution engine that essentially runs that process over and over and over again. And then the skills and integrations that we have are essentially how we give our platform arms and legs to go and reach out to the other third-party systems like SAP, S/4HANA, and go ahead and write out to it. Right. In the event that an issue does occur, we have this exception engine where we'll pause the process. We're going to explain what's going on, and then potentially offer that business user a potential solution. And then from there, once you resolve that exception, you can then choose to save it into the corporate memory. So that way your process gets smarter and smarter each and every time that you go through it. So all that to say, it's not the traditional, RPA process where, when you run into a corner case, you're crashing and burning, but you're actually getting smarter each and every time you run that process. So, all right, let's transition here from our architecture into kind of what we have planned today for the demo, right? Setting the scene with SAP. So in today's scenario, we've got a pharmaceutical company that is doing a four-way match in SAP, right? The 4 documents that we are matching are the purchase order, the invoice, the certificate of analysis, and the goods receipt. And this particular customer, even with 40 people working on this, still had all sorts of issues with errors, data systems that were out of sync, and just they were dropping the ball, right? There were payments that were being made late, that weren't being made at all. And it was really, really frustrating for not just their internal teams, but also, the external stakeholders that they were interacting with. And they had a very well documented SOP that over 300 pages long. And, it's not that the people that were working the process were, at fault. We're all human. We all, need to take, weekends off, things like that. But it's really, it's not how the process is set up, as one of our customers said, but it's actually who we have doing it, right? So instead of having a human who is, fallible, who has, days off and weekends and time off, right? Let's have AI do this where it's super manual, super repetitive, super, a lot of brain damage in doing this, and we can go ahead and automate all that for them. And it's not just with this one pharmaceutical company, but we're actually doing this across all sorts of different industries and verticals. If you go to the next slide here, we're automating not just SAP processes, but all sorts of different processes from accounting to help desk to operations, IT, kind of you name it, right? And the beauty of Kognitos is you can start very, very small with a single use case, single process, and then kind of scale up and grow from there. So, with that, I think I'll leave the slideshow portion of the show today and hand it over to Mr. George Williams to show us what that looks like in practice.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Andrew and Joe. Okay, let's take a look at this. But to double tap on what Andrew covered briefly on setting the stage, we need to really understand in detail the complexity of the four-way process. So what you're looking at right here on the right is the dashboard for Kognitos, which we'll come back to in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and pull up SAP on the right here. On the left, let's look at what that four-way process might look like. So typically, in this procure-to-pay process, we need to match a bunch of documents that Andrew covered. You're going to have a buyer who's going to attempt to purchase something from a manufacturer, in this case, the pharmaceutical company. Now, when a pharmaceutical company issues a PO, at some point, they're going to get paid. But before they do, they need to track these different documents that are part of the procure-to-pay process. And with large companies, they have a lot of different teams involved: procurement, receiving, logistics, quality assurance, accounts payable, that all need to work together. So where Andrew mentioned the comment about dropping the ball, it's really multiple people needing to track down multiple things and chasing documents, chasing folks, trying to figure out the status of things. This challenge exists in every single business, whether it's healthcare, procure to pay, IT. It's just interfacing with multiple groups, not knowing the status of something because you might have an email pending somewhere else, a document waiting. It just hasn't been entered in a centralized system so everybody has access to that information. Well, today we're going to solve that. So as we advance this out, this particular company, which is very common to what they do, actually track the information in multiple places. Now, what you're seeing here is when that PO is issued, to make it easy to verify the contents of the PO across the subsequent documents that will come in, like your goods receipt, your invoice, your COA, they're tracking it in a central repository. In this case, it's Smartsheet, could be Excel, could be something else. They also put the document for logistics into SAP. At some point, the vendor is going to get paid for their order, so they'll go ahead and submit an invoice. Following the process, the buyer here, the pharmaceutical company, will go ahead and enter those details into SAP. They'll enter that back into Smartsheet to confirm that they match, and this continues on. Bill of lading, when it's shipped, is going to be pushed out, and you'll see this repeat again and again. The information is entered into multiple places. At some point, the folks in the warehouse will accept those goods. They'll check it against the slip in the package, confirm that the goods that arrived actually matched what was in the bill of lading, and they'll enter that also into SAP and Smartsheet. And this goes on and on and on. Now, this starts to give you a pretty good look at how complicated this process is. And believe it or not, this is still a fairly high level view of it. There's other documents, there's other steps involved. This is just to streamline it to give you a sense of the complexity. Now, why is this? Well, when we purchase something, it can be fairly complicated because we need to make sure that before we pay for it, especially in compliant situations like purchasing drugs, food, anything like that, we need to make sure that the quality check is in line, that the goods we receive meet certain specifications. But we also need to make sure that that purchase order matches what we receive at the warehouse. And finally, before we pay it, we need to make sure that all of these things are in alignment. The quantity of the goods received matches what was ordered, matches the price per unit, all comes back to the invoice. And again, tracking all these things down leads to teams constantly spending time on the phone, reaching out to other various teams, just trying to figure out where the heck is this last document. We know we issued a PO. We know that we have to meet certain payment terms. If we miss those terms, it could cost us money. It could impact our finances. A lot of other downstream issues could occur. So how do we solve for this? Well, I'll tell you what, now that we have automation in the process, we're going to embed agentic AI, specifically Kognitos, and things are going to move very, very fast. So strap into your seats because this is going to take off. Every step that you just saw, we'll walk through, but we'll show you how it would be handled with automation. Now, let's get started here. In our previous scenario, we issued a PO. So on the right here, we have SAP. We have a PO created. It's not yet been sent. We'll dig in here a bit. And we can see my PO. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and submit that PO so we can kick off the process. Fantastic. So the PO has now been submitted. Now what Kognitos is going to do is intercept that. And they'll introduce that information into both Ariba and SAP. go ahead and submitting the rest of them on the back end here. So we have different documents floating around, going to the different systems. And you'll see the information start to appear in a couple different places. One is SAP, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. The other is going to be into Smartsheet. Now, at Smartsheet, I mentioned that we're tracking those different documents so we can compare them. So what's our PO number for the purchase order? What is the batch, vendor? We also have COAs coming in and lots of other details. Now, before we go into SAP and we look at what happens when it appears in there, let's take a look at the interface for Kognitos. Now, Andrew, you're pretty familiar with this, so if I leave anything out, feel free to jump in and ask a question for our audience. But when you sign into Kognitos, the first screen you're going to see is what we call the performance dashboard. Now, what this is showing you on the right here is all of our different agents that we have running. And at the bottom here, it shows you the number of times they've run with no human in the loop. Now, this is a very, very important process, or a very important component of the solution. The top bar, human in the loop, or with user interaction, means that something popped up. There was some type of exception that needed to grab somebody's attention, particularly the process owner, and get them involved. A scenario that might occur where you might want that to happen is, what happens if a vendor submits an invoice to us and that invoice is missing a purchase order? We have no way to align it in our different systems. So you want a human to be in the loop. In our case, automation doesn't break down. It actually prompts you with an exception. The way it'll do that is go ahead and send an email to the process owner. They can click on the email, dig into it, and say, hey, you know what? I will manually enter this purchase order, or maybe I can find it somewhere else, but it'll keep the process going. The big thing here is the entire automation doesn't break down just because one unexpected variable is missing. Instead, it notifies the process owner, whoever you deem to be that part of the automation scenario, so they can get involved, triage the scenario, and then keep things moving. Now, for Kognitos, what this looks like as we start to build it out is, as I mentioned, the agent takes over. The various teams that you saw on the right before are no longer in the middle of the situation. Instead, you have the agent intercepting these different documents. They're entering the information into SAP. At the same time, they're entering the details as they come in on demand into Smartsheet. So that when your purchase order arrives, it's entered. Invoice entered. Goods receipt entered. You are virtually eliminating the human error component of it. Now, these are very, very complicated documents with multiple variables across them. As you see, and I expect that we're starting to have a process. If we were to come in here and look at, for example, the certificate of analysis, we can see that it's already popped up here. The agent has extracted the data from the document and it's inputted into Smartsheet. On the right here, what you're seeing is the COA. Well, the COA is going to have a PO number, material name, lots of other variables. Very easy to get these wrong if you're entering them by hand. In addition to this, the agent's doing one more thing for us. I've asked the agent to, well, for one, to enter in the person who approved QA. So it's one of the variables that's extracted from the document, but also analyze the contents of the document itself. So in a certificate of analysis, again, it's certifying that the ingredients that were delivered meet the quality specifications. For example, the moisture content of the ingredients that arrive needs to be less than or equal to 2%. In this case, it's 1.2%, so it passes. However, if it were higher than that, this Kognitos check would be a fail. It would be easily visible in here because it would be highlighted as red, and a notification email would be sent to the downstream team so that they can order a new replacement shipment, because at this point, it's important for them to know this as soon as possible. So when a scenario where drugs aren't quite meeting the quality specifications, it's not only important that we don't pay for them, but it's also important that we place our order because we have downstream logistics teams that may need to restock shelves, that need to set expectations for other suppliers. It's just critical. So the sooner we have this information, the better. Now, the last step is when all this takes place, the humans are no longer tracking down that information. Instead, the result is delivered to them. So by this point, I'm expecting that the agent has extracted all the information from the various documents that you're seeing here. Let's go back to SAP and take a look.
So while you're doing that, right, you mentioned that downstream information, you want to be able to feed that back into the ERP system.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of a good illustration of how you can start small with something as simple as let's take the invoice, let's process it, and let's throw it into a system, all the way to, let's build this notion of a closed loop ERP where based on how many drugs we're producing, we can then, modify the production schedules for next
Mhm.
quarter. We can, look at, what drugs are expiring and,
Precisely.
basically tie all that into our, next quarter forecast, 2 quarter forecast, rolling 4 quarter forecast, right?
Great example, 100%. All the way down to even extending kind of where you're going past this process into what happens when we have goods that, well, they meet their expiration date. The next step that we won't cover today. So, hey, Joe, a great follow-up session would be logistics. What happens when we need to track the destruction process when goods meet their final expiration date? Because Andrew's hinting on updating the logistics pipeline, destroying those drugs. It's basically part 2 of this scenario. It's a good one. If we get enough feedback, maybe we'll create a scenario around that.
Great. Good stuff. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so Andrew, great timing. You can see that our purchase order has been sent. We have since received our shipment. The agent has entered the information into SAP, notifications here, and we've received our invoice as well. These entries have been created. They are precision, meaning no human had to get in the loop. Instead, the agent did that for them. Now, there's one step further. It's not only important that the information is entered, but also the paper documents that are part of the process need to be tracked. So your invoice, your certificate of analysis, goods receipt should all be tracked within SAP. So the timeliness of having an agent create the entry, be 100% accurate, and attach the appropriate documents in the correct place is extraordinarily valuable because these various teams here are no longer tracking that information down. Now let's go one step further. I said that teams use different tools as a central, call it a central a central view of the truth of the organization. In this case, that's going to be Smartsheet. So let's see, our invoice is processed. We can see here. And at that point, there we go. We received an email notifying us that we have a match. Here's the details of the match. And it was successful. Now, this is a critical step because nobody in this process had to be involved tracking these items down. There's no delay in shipment. There's no delay in notification. There's no manual errors. All those issues that we typically see with automation process fade into the background. That is absolutely critical because it's funny, Andrew, I think you and I and Joe and team have had a lot of these conversations where people are afraid that AI is going to eliminate jobs. At this point, as long as I've been doing this, I have not heard that be a fear of any one team I've talked to. Matter of fact, almost 100% of the teams, whether this be logistics, procurement, IT, any one of them say, this would actually allow us to tackle the backlog of tasks and jobs that we have building up. There's often too much work for the people that we have. So we're not working on the important building the business tasks. Instead, we're manually triaging these tasks like, where's the documents? Is it entered correctly? Trying to triage errors because of manual entry issues. Well, this allows you to get back to the things that are most important.
And kind of to that point, George, right? I think you're on a good part of the screen here, right? So as all these processes get designed, between Kognitos and their customers, important part of that process design is understanding the value it provides, right? In terms of having the humans work on the most valuable tasks that they possibly can. It's
Mhm.
important to also understand with each run over time how much value you're actually creating for the business. Now, I know, from working here, right, that these numbers aren't coming out of thin air. But George, if you could just kind of show us how that gets built, because I think that's super important for people to know as they're going out and understanding, like, hey, what types of processes should I be looking for to go automate?
I think the question is, what can we not automate? This is such a
Well,
flexible tool.
right, but
It's a great point.
given that we could automate anything,
Yeah.
like, where should we start? Right, the most expensive processes that we can, right?
Yeah, the higher value in the process, in my mind, the better. Let's tackle the big hairy challenges first. But you made an important point I want to make sure we don't breeze past on the ROI or the impact of automation. What you're seeing here on the right here is for our procure-to-pay process. I have multiple agents here, as any organization might have something for HR, something for finance. Different parts of their organizations are being automated. Here with procure-to-pay, there's some simple math going on. It's how long did the task take? Based in how much does that cost for us to pay a person to do it? Now, in this case, We don't enter any of these numbers. These are 100% entered by our customers. And this is fairly modest assessment right here. So if it takes 20 minutes to track down the bill of lading, open up the email, review it, make sure it's accurate, and then open up SAP, get to the right screen in SAP, enter those different details, then go into Smart Sheets, do the same thing, it's fairly modest. Save $50. Then for each one of the parts of that process, could be saving equal amounts of time. The savings add up quickly. That's for sure. Building you an ROI graph here, as well as showing you how consistently the process is delivering on performance.
Exactly. Because it's not just about, hey, can we go and automate this and have a cool platform to go do this with? It's, I need to be able to show my boss that, this is a positive ROI, day over day, month over month. And as we adopt new processes, ensure that that ROI, keeps growing, right? It's not something where, we kind of flatline out at a certain number of processes, or, if we're automating really, really, low dollar tasks, then, we could even see it go the other way. But yeah, it's kind of helps us know what our North Star is in terms of like, are we automating the right types of processes to really, make sense for the business.
It's a fair concern. I've been doing this long enough to know that shelfware, most of our products to these days are SaaS services, but the concept of putting things on the shelf after you acquire them is a real challenge. So being able to show that you've purchased a solution that's having an immediate impact is critical.
George,
Great points here.
at that point too, I mean, I think what we're seeing here is obviously very helpful to see how as a specific use case, this is in the context of a particular organization. For those on the call today, maybe their stack is a little bit different. Their needs are a little bit unique, as it is with any organization. Can you just talk about how that experience might be a little bit different and how we look at this P2P use case or maybe other use cases outside of it?
Absolutely. This is procure to pay because it's a fun use case to tackle. I'm very fond of it just because of the complexity of it, the number of steps in it. But this can easily apply to something like IT. Maybe it's going through an approval process for infrastructure changes, and there's a back and forth between the development team, the person requesting the change, and we want to automate that. It's easy as building a process to collect the correct data that typically the IT people might be involved in. And we can automate this using tools like Slack, different central points of central views of the organization to understand what's being requested, having the back and forth in Slack being automated. And then finally, when it's approved, simply IT or the support team can press a button and Kognitos can initiate the change. So again, all of the back and forth in any type of process can typically be automated, really creating a buffer between the people that need to push the button and the people that are making requests. All of that between time. So the people on both sides of the pushing the button and making the request can get back to owning different parts of their business, doing those tasks, and playing less phone tag.
Very helpful. Thank you. And I think we'll kind of continue to raise questions to the surface, but I think my curious point of view too, and I know you're going to pull up the results as well, but looking at maybe the proximity to, like you said, some of those business users to the actual implementation here. I know you talked about speed to value, and you did
Great
just
point.
mention the interaction, but I mean, what does that actually look like in terms of, previous instances like Andrew brought up earlier? You're bringing in consultants, you're bringing in architects, you're bringing in developers.
Yeah,
How is this different?
this is a perfectly timed question, Joe. Thank you. So how is this different? Typically, it can take weeks or months, often months with traditional automations to deploy something of this scale and get value from it. And that's perfectly reasonable based on the technology constraints they're dealing with. Now, when you develop an automation, any type of software to go ahead and resolve an issue, you require programmers to get involved. They have to interview the business, ask a lot of questions, figure out what needs to happen. And then Andrew mentioned exceptions. So what happens if we develop software or program that doesn't account for every single exception? Well, in automation, if it's not accounted for, it breaks. This scenario, that doesn't happen. The way Kognitos has developed it, Andrew mentioned we develop our process using human language. That process is then pushed into a graph itself, which you're seeing on the right here. So if you follow along, simply by asking for it to process the invoice, actually, I'll just talk through this step by step. This process is the one for invoicing. It's receiving the invoice, extracting the information from the document attached. It's recording the data. And this is one of the more complicated ones, so I chose this. It's fetching then from the invoice, it's got the data. It is then fetching the total for the PO. It's fetching the goods receipt quantity. It's fetching the details for the COA. And again, this is all related to a single run. So think of all the various documents for the procure-to-pay process. It's evaluating.
And George, this is timely because Sandeep actually just asked that same question of how is the agent doing this four-way match, which you're actually answering right now. So I'm glad you're getting to this
Sandeep,
right when we are.
I appreciate you speaking up and asking that question. And thanks, Andrew, for prompting that up. Yeah, so it's evaluating the criteria, like I said, of that COA. We're not just trusting the human. I'll be honest, it's not that the humans we're slow, but everybody makes mistakes. We're fallible. And if you're looking at hundreds of documents throughout your daily steps or weeks, you might see a value that looks like a less than or an equal to, or you miss one. And you hit OK. Well, in this case, we have Kognitos evaluating as well. So making sure that those ingredients meet the checks of the quality that needs to be provided by the provider of those ingredients. So we put the right things in the right place. And then finally, comparing those details against the invoice, the last step. Now here's the fun part. Did any of these fail? If they did, we're composing a custom message that will send the results to the appropriate team on the left here. Now, if it fails that invoice, we're not going to tell the accounts payable team that it failed. We're going to send them a notification that says failure for this invoice, which ties to this purchase order with these other details. So they can take action immediately. No tracking it down, no data entry. Great question, Andrew and Sandeep from the audience.
Nothing from the audience yet, but I mean, to me, this is, if there's 30 or 40 people that don't have to go and track down documents, they can just, trust that this is all flowing through. Like that is a huge weight off their shoulders. Because I don't know about you, but after I have to go through like one page of my email, I'm, those emails are pretty much gone, right? So having something where it kind of just keeps track of the minutia, especially of such a detailed process like this, like I'm all for it.
100%. Now, Joe, Andrew, I can't see the audience here because I'm presenting my screen. But anybody who uses SAP know that it's a beautifully complicated system. That's saying it nicely. It's very, very powerful. However, to get to any one piece of SAP, it's very robust. And I mean that affectionately. But to track down and compare data points, it's find the correct purchase order, go to well, first of all, remember which purchase order that I'm looking for in the first place, because this is an organization. We have many, basically an endless number of them. Identify the correct purchase order. Let's see, we were on, jump into it. There we go. I actually clicked the wrong button. This is a great example. You click the wrong button, you don't get to the right place. So click the arrow versus the white space. Then click the arrow to look at the purchase order itself, the item details. There we go. Then jump all the way down to the purchase order details, where you can then see, did we get the goods receipt? Click in the goods receipt to look for the information, then compare that goods receipt information to the invoice. Now, it'd be a heck of a lot easier if these entries can be created themselves. Then for the comparison point, which I mentioned, smart sheets, in this case, invoices come in, it's compared against the certificate of analysis, it's compared against the goods receipt, the purchase order, and finally, when things are complete, you receive an email to the appropriate team. In this case, it's account payable, letting them know there's been a four-way match. Again, it's all about delivering the results directly to the people versus having people involved in a process that, frankly, they shouldn't be involved in. Manual documents going back and forth, data entry to multiple different systems, going back in, comparing details, confirming that things are correct and accurate, frankly, multiple back and forth phone conversations. So, Joe, Andrew, I think if I were to kind of summarize some of the value here, it's that Kognitos can automate just about any process. It can be called based on the triggers that match your business, whether it's an email, API, which just means talking directly to your application, Slack notification. It will extract that information, analyze it, input it into the correct downstream systems, automate matching, and deliver the results to the people that matter most, the folks in your business who have a backlog of tasks to complete, so they can tackle that while automation can handle everything else.
Yeah, perfect. So George, while you were answering that last question, Sandeep came back with one more, right? Obviously, this is all great, and in demos, everything always works perfectly, right? Wink, wink. But Sandeep is actually looking for, what's an example of when things go wrong? What does that output? What does that result look like? And I saw when you were, going through your email there when we were doing some tests earlier before this webinar, you had a couple of mismatches where the COA wasn't, up to snuff. Can you show us what that looks like?
Yeah, thanks for calling it back to that. So what we're commenting on here is exception handling, a critical part of the process. Really, that's where the automation in traditional classic solutions would break down because there's a unaccounted for scenario that needs to now be programmed. You need to update your automation, call for an outage window so they can update the software. In this case, that doesn't happen. What we're going to do is, let's see here, we're going to notify the process owner. Now, since I created this process, I'm the process owner. And in this case, we have an exception that was raised for, let's see, goods receipt. So I'll get a notification. I can click on that. It will take me to our guidance center. Now, as this pops up, it's going to show me that notification itself. And it will simply say that we're missing the related PO number. As I look to the right here, I'm noticing, okay, well, that makes sense. When this document was processed, there appears to be no PO number. Will that be there? So that allows the human then to track other systems, go in to figure out where this PO number might be, instead of shutting down the process itself. When they have the correct digits, simply enter it in here and press submit. Again, it's that easy. Alternatively, you could assign this to different people on your team or hold it until you have the answer. While automation continues, it doesn't stop everything in its tracks because one variable was unaccounted for.
And I'll just chime in there, George, because I remember it always sticks out to me as a use case. There was one of our customers that had received invoices that were double-sided. So the invoice number was always on page 2, right? So not only can you answer it in that individual instance, but you can essentially have it learn that, hey, when we get an invoice from Biochem Manufacturing, check page 2 for the invoice number.
Joe, that's a brilliant point. Yeah, it doesn't matter how many pages there are or where the detail is at. Our agent will scan all the document pages, even if they're out of order. Frankly, if we expect them to be out of order, we could tell it that they likely might not be in order. Let the agent know the expected order of the documents. It will reorder them, extract the information, put it in the right places. It's that simple, where this is typically a challenge for classic OCR solutions. It's the advantage of harnessing the power of AI without letting it go rogue. Now, I know that this is kind of an important point. I know that Andrew mentioned that the extreme scenario where AI can delete your entire environment, and that is a potential disaster scenario. Well, in ours, we use AI as in strategic points in our platform, specifically in understanding the intent when the human is interacting with the design the process, then translating that using our deterministic engine to harden the process. Then that process runs in our execution engine, which is separate from development. Now, this is critically important. When that process is running in the execution engine, it's finalized, it's confirmed. There is no variance in it. However, even there, if we had a scenario that we didn't account for and something pops up, that execution engine will not just blow up. Instead, it will look at the unaccounted for issue. It will pass that off to the exception engine. It'll translate that to English, meaning, hey, instead of showing you a traceback error or some complicated coding message, it'll simply say, hey, we are missing the related PO number for this goods receipt. Can you help me out? A lot of good questions today. This is a very important topic. We've already helped a number of customers automate their procure-to-pay processes, so I'm glad that everybody showed up today. Please keep the questions coming.
Let's see. Sandeep had one more about the goods receipts and PO number. One question here: how is the goods receipt uploaded in SAP if it doesn't have a PO number? As far as I understand, a goods receipt is only updated against a PO. Was this GRN a standalone document somewhere in the system? Pretty sure it had a PO number, or
Now,
maybe you flashed it up too quick.
Sandeep's paying attention here. So no, actually, Sandeep is correct. So in the scenario that I showed you where it was uploaded in SAP, there's no missing PO number. When I came back to look for my exceptions, it was a historical exception from a scenario that might have been yesterday, the day before. The documents that we submitted for this process had the PO number involved in it. But I appreciate that somebody was paying attention. That exception, again, recap it.
Good
That
catch.
exception
Good
was from a
catch.
day or two ago.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we didn't rerun the process just now when he was looking for that exception. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
All right, let's see. Oh, well, he's got one more. Okay, let's see. Missing PO, simple case. What if COA is missing or GRN? Different
Oh, these are
quantities have
brilliant.
some quality issues. How the workflow progress? Yeah, so Sandeep, we actually covered that in the workflow right here, right? Exactly. So if any check fails, right? If the answer is yes, then there's a failure notification, and then we can we'll send out that email saying, hey, this four-way match didn't happen, right? If it's just one
Right.
of them, it might be a successful three-way match, but
Mhm.
that's only if when's the successful three-way match, George?
This is brilliant. So in my business, since automation is there, and again, I didn't plan to cover this, but if I were to take the procure-to-pay process, the four-way match to the next step, frankly, I would send out notifications at every step because it's free, right? Tell me when the two-way match occurs. So two-way match will occur when the PO comes in or it's been sent. We're tracking that, and then there's an invoice. That's two-way match. Goods receipt, I want to know when the PO matches the goods receipt. Then the PO, goods receipt, and COA match, three-way match. And finally, matching against the COA as well. So the four different documents that we're matching are the PO, are the goods receipt, the COA, and the invoice. Keeping me on my toes this morning, Andrew, Joe, and Sandeep.
Sandeep's on one. He's got it.
Yeah, I gotta send Sandeep a t-shirt, please.
I have another one for you, George. And I was just thinking back, we did a high-level P2P webinar a couple months back. And think would still be relevant to a lot of the folks on this call. And one of the questions that was raised there was, the P2P process is huge, right?
Mhm.
If you look at it with RPA, how it was tackled, it's, maybe a series of 24 tasks, right? So if you're talking about those trust issues that Andrew mentioned earlier in the call, someone may be working with Kognitos, they don't want to go end to end. They want to put humans in the loop. How can they approach that, or how should they think about that for maybe a process as complex as P2P or R2R, one of those really, really large workflows?
Absolutely brilliant. So there was a customer, and this could be a common scenario, but there was a very, very large Fortune 50 customer that wanted to automate a process like this. Now, there was a little bit of concern just kind of handing it off to automation. So in that scenario, what we did is we automated the process end to end for all of this. However, before we created all the entries in the downstream systems, we just queued them up in the guidance center and waited for that person to approve it. Now, instead of them going through and doing all the manual extracting the information, find the documents, we did all that. We just teed them up to be ready so they could go into the guidance center and say, yep, looks good, looks good, looks good, looks good. That's it. It's a simple go-between. We'll call it a soft stop for them to get comfortable with what's being entered into downstream systems. Again, instead of tracking down the information, we've got it all teed up. It's waiting for somebody to push a button in the guidance center. When they feel comfortable, they push the button, and then it continues the process. Now, it's worth noting, since I know we have a lot of new folks in the call, that when they go into the guidance center, you can view what the agent is going to put in the downstream system. You can review the document, get comfortable with the two are matching. Andrew called out earlier that we constantly are saying English is code. Honestly, one of my favorite things about this is the auditability. When we say English is code, that basically means that when it runs a step like extracting a PO number, well, that PO number is going to be right next to it. Extracts other data points, you have them. So it's a complete audit trail for every single run, all the way to history. So if you have compliance or just security concerns, if you're curious about validating what AI or what the extraction process is coming up with, that audit trail exists for every single scenario that Kognitos is involved in.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, George. I think that was super helpful. If you wouldn't mind, I think we can probably move to wrapping up at this point. I do want to kind of put out a couple of my questions and give people some directions on where to go next and where we go from here. If you wouldn't mind pulling up the presentation again.
You got it.
And thank you for all the engagement there in the Q&A. Very, very helpful. And
Yeah.
again, we always want to make these webinars as engaging, as valuable as possible. So one thing I will say is George kind of gave us some good ideas earlier, but as we look forward to future webinars, please send them to me, joe@kognitos.com. We're looking to do, like, especially more use case oriented webinars. We find that that is the request we get the most. Hey, I want to see this situation. Maybe you're an Oracle user and you actually want to see something over there. Any of those things apply. Just go ahead and email that over to joe@kognitos.com and we'll try to get it on the docket. In addition to that, I do want to make sure everyone knows that we also have a community edition that is now open to everyone. So if you haven't been exposed to Kognitos directly, you can do it yourself. You can go to kognitos.com/community and try it out today. We have some great pre-built agents, environments you can jump right into and see how things are working around yourself. Or you can go and use our auto write functionality to essentially chat with Kognitos and build your own process from scratch really quickly. So excited about that. And last but certainly not least, these two gentlemen with me today, experts in the space. If you ever want to schedule a personalized demo, if there's a use case that you haven't been able to crack, or you're looking to, again, how you can deploy AI safely, please reach out as always to sales@kognitos.com or to George or Andrew directly. And of course, we're happy to help you there.
Hey,
Cool.
I'm seeing a lot of questions come up in the chat. Just know that we will follow up with everybody who weren't able to answer your questions on screen today, but I'm hugely appreciative for a lot of the engagement that's been coming across.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you, George. Thank you, Andrew. And everyone, please look forward to the recording link here shortly and hope to see you at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.